Chapter 12. Schemes and Sandwiches. "What are you doing here?" Nancy snapped, pointing an accusing finger at Semet. Crouching on his heels like a great, pale frog, the innkeeper stared at the girl in dismay. I dropped something," he stammered. "I was just looking for it." "How did it happen that it was dropped so close to the door?" Nancy demanded. Semet quailed before Nancy and took a hop backward. When I was cleaning this morning, I dropped a dime," he spluttered. "Are you sure you didn't drop it when you stopped so quickly in the road you skidded into a fence?" Nancy demanded, repressing a smile. "Maybe I did." "I mean, certainly not," Semet squeaked, taking another step backward as Nancy shook her finger again. "You were eavesdropping, as a matter of fact," the girl accused, advancing toward the innkeeper, while the 5 men crowded into the doorway to watch the amusing but dramatic spectacle. "Never!" Semet wailed. "I wouldn't do such a thing." "Why did you pursue me this morning?" Nancy cried, taking a fresh tack. "I didn't!" Semet cried, hopping back once again at the new accusation. He teetered for a moment on the top step, and then with a yell of fright toppled over and fell headlong down the stairs. He picked himself up on the landing after completing a somersault and a half with no visible damage, except that to his pride. Are you hurt?" Nancy gasped. "I'll sue you for pushing me down," Semet shouted, rubbing his head and one shin. "I might have broken my neck." "Frank," Asa called down to the bruised and outraged innkeeper. "Oh, Frank, when you get all the way down, will you open the front door for these 2 gentlemen? They are coming right after you. But right side up, I hope." Peter and Jacob looked startled. Then, as if realizing they would only hurt their cause by staying longer, they silently and sheepishly descended the stairs behind the limping Semet. Asa sighed deeply as the men vanished and reached for the doorframe to support himself. Evidently, the strain of the morning's events had shaken him deeply. Nancy flew to his side and led the aged man back to his favorite seat, where she settled him comfortably, a pillow at the back of his head and a stool at his feet. "A remarkable adventure, Carson," Mr. Hill said to Mr. Drew. "I did not expect so much drama and comedy to attend the signing of a will, and I am grateful to you and to Nancy for allowing me to share in the events. Somehow, excitement always seems to follow my daughter around," the lawyer laughed. "I really think she is a magnet for adventure." Nancy smiled at the men. "If that is true, I ought to be locked up someplace," she laughed. "I'd hate to think myself responsible for all that happened here today." "You were certainly responsible for that man Frank's unusual descent of the stairs," Mr. Hill laughed back. "And now I think I shall return to my business. I'll certainly remember all that you told me, Carson, at our little conference. Was there anything further?" "No, I am sure you understand the general situation as well as I do," Mr. Drew replied. "Shall Nancy drive you back to the bank?" No, Mr. Hill protested. "I shall call up my chauffeur, who is no doubt waiting at the bank for me, and have him come here. It must be very close to luncheon time." "I don't have to consult my watch to agree with you," Carson Drew smiled. "I feel hungry. How about you, Nancy?" "I had some cocoa and crackers a little while ago," Nancy replied. "But I could eat. Indeed, I could. And I can wait, too." "Good. I want to examine that man Semet," her father said. "Well then, goodbye for the present, Raymond." Mr. Hill left the room, and Mr. Drew paused in the doorway for another word with old Mr. Sidney. A soft footfall was heard on the steps, and Sadie appeared, carrying a loaded tray. I made some sandwiches," she said shyly, "and a pitcher of iced tea with fresh mint in it." Wonderful, wonderful, the lawyer exclaimed heartily. And you must sit right down with us and share the meal, Sadie. I should like to become much better acquainted with you. Sadie is a very good girl, my only comfort and helper, Asa said, lifting his head from the pillows. My dear child, sit here beside me. You look very tired. I'm not tired at all, the young waitress replied stoutly, putting the tray on the table and lifting the cloth that covered it. Now, what shall I give you, Mr. Drew? I made both kinds of sandwiches, dainty ones and good, thick, substantial ones. What a picture they make, too, Mr. Drew commented. You are an artist, Sadie, an artist who uses foodstuffs instead of paints and a tray instead of a canvas. A squat jug, bedewed with moisture, ice clinking against its sides, and a bunch of fragrant mint projecting above its rim, stood in the center of the tray. Glasses, with a little pile of plates and napkins, flanked the pitcher. There were platters heaped high with three-cornered sandwiches of white, brown, and rye bread. A few nasturtium blossoms had been scattered on the tray as a final touch. There are chicken sandwiches, cucumber and mayonnaise sandwiches, and egg salad on the white bread, Sadie pointed out. The brown bread has crabapple jelly and chopped dates with walnuts. The rye bread has ham and Swiss cheese with mustard. Please help yourselves. No one needed a second invitation. Mr. Sidney proved that the exciting events had not robbed him of his appetite, and the others, of course, had had theirs whetted the more by the dramatic adventures of the morning. After his fifth sandwich and third glass of iced minted tea, Mr. Drew announced that he was going to have a word with Semmet and excused himself. Don't be harsh with Frank, Asa requested. He is not a bad fellow at all, just too curious over matters that do not concern him. At that, he might be excused for trying to learn what all the hubbub was about. I have no legal authority to be harsh with him or to force him in any way, Mr. Drew replied. If he will volunteer any information in reply to some questions, well and good. If he does not, no matter. After all, he is Sadie's foster father, and I am indebted to him for that, Asa said. Sadie, that was a delicious lunch. Things always taste much better when you prepare them. Even if Frank brings my tray of mush and milk, I can tell whether or not you prepared it. Oh, Mr. Sidney, you are just having fun with me, the orphan returned, coloring at the compliments. She arose to clear up the remains of the meal as Mr. Drew left the room. Just sit quietly for a while, Sadie. There is no hurry, Asa said. It is very pleasant having such charming callers as Nancy and yourself. Tell me something interesting. What is going on in the world? The transcontinental airmail is making daily stops at River Heights now, Nancy ventured, wondering what gossip would please the old man. Remarkable! Remarkable, Asa mused. When I came to this country, it was a month's journey here from New York. Now I suppose one can fly from New York to San Francisco in a few days. In one day, Mr. Sidney, Nancy said. Well, well, can it be true? Asa commented. His lids drooped over his eyes, and almost instantly the old man was sound asleep, evidently worn out by the stirring events of the morning. Isn't it wonderful to think of the history Mr. Sidney has lived through? Nancy mused. He can remember when there were slaves. He has seen the kerosene lamp replace the candle, the gas light take the place of oil lamps, and now electric lights are found even in isolated farmhouses. Yes, and the stagecoach developed into the airplane, Sadie replied. He has seen the telephone, the radio, steam heat, electric ice boxes. Oh, all the things we think we couldn't do without have come into use in his lifetime. At that, he hasn't seen human nature change very much, Nancy commented. Sadie, didn't you ever tell him what you suspect about Mr. Semmet? Oh, Nancy, how can I? I can't prove anything, the distressed girl whispered excitedly. I don't want to be a talebearer. It would only make him unhappy. Yes, that is true, Nancy said. Perhaps it will not be hard to find proof for your suspicions, though. And have you considered that it is not only unfair to Mr. Sidney, but to whomever he will make his heirs, to let Mr. Semmet cheat him? What shall I do? Sadie cried. I am so confused. Don't do anything, Nancy said impulsively, putting an arm over the frail girl's shoulders. Let the whole sad business fade from your mind. I will talk it over with my father. He is such a splendid man, Sadie sighed. You are so lucky to have a fine, famous person like Mr. Drew for your father, Nancy. I wish I knew who my parents were. Haven't I promised you that we shall settle that problem too? Nancy asked, patting the orphan as she rose. Let's carry these things out quietly so Mr. Sidney can rest, and don't worry about a thing, Sadie. I have seen the most confused situations clear up just as soon as the key to the puzzle was found, and we'll find it this time. End of chapter 12.